Hey everybody, this is Bandor Tyrell, and I'm going to be doing another video on Substance Painter from Adobe for Second Life. I've done several videos so far that talk about how to use Substance Painter to create textures for objects for use in Second Life, how to bring those objects into Substance Painter, how to create projects, about baking mesh maps, about using materials and smart materials to texture those objects, and how to take the textures that you create out of Substance Painter and bring the entire package, the object and all of the textures into Second Life. I've also talked about creating ambient occlusion maps and how to use those in Photoshop to create textures as well. I've talked about how to create two-sided panoramas for use as your shader for your light source for your HDRI inside of Substance Painter. But the feedback that I've gotten from people is that they'd like to see more about how you can use more of the features of Substance Painter to actually texture the objects. In the examples that I've done so far, I pretty much used materials and smart materials and just dragged them and dropped them onto the objects. I didn't actually do any painting on the objects. I didn't actually use any of the things like grunge maps or other texture techniques or smart masks and things like that to actually enhance the look of the textures. I was just showing simple ways to use materials and smart materials to get really decent looks that would work in Second Life without much effort. So today I want to take some time and show you some ways that you can actually get creative inside of Substance Painter to really take your texturing to another level. So to do that, I'm not going to show you the basics of how to bring things in and set them up. I've already done that. So I have started with a model already in Substance Painter. This is it's very similar to a model that I'm working on for a Halloween altar set, but it's much more simplified. So this could be anything. It could be an altar, it could be a box, it could be whatever you want it to be. So we're going to play around with texturing this in ways that will be more than just dragging and dropping some stuff. So I've already gone through, I think I already did. Yes, I've already gone through and baked my mesh maps. So we are ready to start. So as I've done before, we'll start with just applying a simple texture to this object. I'm going to use a wood grain texture because I think it's going to give us some character that would it would look good and be. Actually, let's not do that. Let's do something different. Let's do some stone. Let's put some stone on here and then play with the stone. So I have all these. This is my. Let me talk about this first, so you understand what we're doing here. This is the Adobe Substance Painter. It's pretty much out of the box configuration, but I did move my asset panel to the bottom. It started out, it was over here on the left, but I've moved it to the bottom because that's what I'm used to from the old algorithmic version of Substance Painter. So you can just grab this and drag it down and then let go and it will pop into the bottom. That's how I've got it set up. And then let's look at what we've got here in the menu bar for the asset panel. So on the left is an expansion arrow and it says all libraries. So we're able to look through all the libraries. We can narrow that scope to just things that are for this project. My starter assets are the things that it came with out of the box, and then your assets are assets that I've purchased or that I've imported. And then session is things that I'm doing just for this use. This time I'm using the Substance Painter, so I could import stuff and say just use it for this session. But right now we're looking at everything. So that's all libraries is selected. In the middle you have a search bar. You can search for keywords or search for specific things that you have, because you can end up with a lot of stuff in here, and finding things could be kind of difficult. We'll play with that in a minute. Over to the right, you have, the very far right is a button that controls the layout of this panel. So right now we're looking at medium-sized icons. You can make them even bigger if you want large ones, and then it's a lot more difficult to scroll through because there's so many. I've imported a lot. You can actually just do it as a list like that, or small icons, which that might be easier to use if you know what they are. If you hover over one of them, it will pop this thumbnail up and show you what it looks like and give you the name, so you can kind of figure it out as you go. But I like to keep it on medium so I can kind of see the names too, or at least parts of the names. So that helps me figure out what I'm doing. Next to that is a series of kind of filters that break it down into different categories. So the first one is materials, and these are materials that someone has created in a number of different ways. You either created them in Substance Designer, or you may have set things up in here in Substance Painter and saved it as a material. You can save it as a smart material. I'm not sure you can actually save it as a material. So these are pretty basic. So for example, like this one here is called Acaju. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Acaju wood varnished. Looks like it was done in Substance Designer. It has a wood pattern that they created, and it's a really cool application if you play around with it. I might do a video to talk about how to do some stuff in Substance Designer. It uses nodes, much like the geometry nodes in Blender, to create a series of effects that generate these wood textures or whatever texture you're playing with. So they use things like, they start with one color, just a solid color, and then they add some noise, and then they color that noise, and they can add some randomness to it, and they can rotate it or manipulate it to create the grain of the wood. You do a few more things to create like what looks like knots in the wood, and you keep playing with all these different nodes till you get the final output to look like wood. And so that's what someone has done with this. And so if you but it's just that. It's just the basic underlying texture. So here's one that looks like ancient cracked mud brick clay wall. Let's try that one. We'll put that on and see what it looks like. So you can see it does look like an ancient mud clay brick wall. I think the texture size is a little bit too big for this object, so we might want to scale that down, and I'll show you how to do that. So we've placed it on our object. You can either do that by dragging directly from the asset panel down here onto your object, or you can drag it over here to the layers palette. It's kind of cool because when you do that, you actually create a copy of it. You're not manipulating the original one that's over here. You can make changes to the instance of this material that we have placed in here, and it does not affect the original one. If you want to save it so that it does affect the original one, there's a way to save these as a smart material, and it will preserve the changes that you've done and give you a new material to work with, so then you can just use that in the future. So you have some basic functions that you can provide here. So this first little drop down here tells you which of the different mesh maps are we playing with when we use this layer. And so this is for the base color. I've never played with that, so that's not something that I normally would touch, and I don't know why you would do it unless you're specifically trying to create a height map or something. I don't know. You're normally working in the base color. Then to the right of this, you have some other buttons. This the delete here is basically just removes the layer. It's the same thing as clicking the delete key. This looks like a folder. It allows you to add a group. So if you do that, you can create a folder, and then you can have multiple things inside the folder just by dragging them in there. And so now this is inside of a folder. I don't want that. If I delete it, it goes away. and then you can drag it back here, or we'll drag it back over here. So the little icon, I'll get to that in a minute. So then you have these buttons, and this one is to add effects, so you can click that, and then you can add these different effects like a generator. You can add an ability to paint. You have a fill layer, and levels lets you modify what you're seeing, increasing or decreasing the amount of like colors or the effects that you have. So it's like sliders that would affect things. And then you have other things in here that you can add to, like filters or anchor points. I don't even know what an anchor point is. The next one is to add a mask. So you can add masks, and then you can work with those, and we'll get into some of that. You can add more layers just by doing that. Now it's added an empty layer here, and so I could then fill the layer, and we'll talk about that in a second. This is called a fill layer, and so by adding that, it lets me put more color or more materials onto my object. Then you can add a preset layer, and then by adding a preset layer, you would pick from one of these presets like aluminum or something, and it's basically the same thing as picking one from down here and dragging it on. It kind of does the exact same thing. So let's get rid of these, go back to what we had to begin with. Now you'll notice that there's an eye. The eye is to show or hide this layer, and so by turning that off, it disappears and you see the base white object. Turning it back on, you now see the effects of this layer on our model. In here is a little box with a thumbnail of the actual material that we've applied, so you can see what it is. And if you click in there, you can modify this in a way. So there's things you can do, like you can add different kinds of masks. You can cut the layer, copy the layer, duplicate the layer. You can remove the layer. You can group the layer. So these are functions that you can do to this layer. And then again, these buttons down here are very similar to just doing the buttons across the top. Let's see. There's the name of the material that we've applied. There's a button here that allows you to edit the geometry mask in either the 2D or the 3D view. So I've never done that. I don't really know what it is, so I don't play with that. And then this is a blending mode. It's very much like a layer mask that you would have in, say, Photoshop. So if you click that, it gives you all these different kind of ways to combine the different layers so that what you see is, normally it's top down here, so what you see on the screen over on the left is the effect of all of the layers that you have in here from a top down perspective. So you start at the bottom with a base color or what you want, and then you start adding things on top of it, and it's a stack, and the output is the combination of all of these different layers. Now how the layers react with each other is based on the blend mode that you have selected. So normal is just what you have now. There's also pass through, multiply is, if you're familiar with Photoshop, these are the same things as the layer masks, right? So you have a multiply, there's overlay, screen, there's some additional ones that are 3D related, like normal map combine, normal map detail, and normal map inverse detail. So that's what this drop down is for. And then this is opacity or transparency. So it's 100% opaque right now, this layer. If I made it transparent, then you could see the underlying layers more. So to show you what I'm talking about, we'll go ahead and drag the wood in here. So right now you don't see the wood on here because this layer is on top of it, and you see from top down, and this layer is opaque and it doesn't show through, and there's nothing on this layer that would rise through. So in order to be able to see some of this, you would need to do something like set this to multiply, and now you get a combination of the two. So that's basically this stone texture applied on top of this wood texture, so you get a combination of both. If we wanted to do, say, overlay instead, it's similar, but it's more, the top one is a little more transparent. There's also things like screen. You could do inverse divide, which I don't know what that does. You need to have more complicated things in here and a bunch more layers, and then you would see stuff really responding to each other. But normal is the way it is by default. And we don't need this, so we'll get rid of it. All right, so now we have talked about the stuff at the top up here in your layer. Now let's go down to the properties panel, and you can see what's going on here. So this is the material properties. So there's the different kind of mesh maps that we could activate for this. So right now we're using color, height, roughness, and metallic. And so we can turn off things we don't want. It does help you save a little bit of memory, and it doesn't do some work later on when it's outputting things because the data is not there to use. So like this, there's nothing metallic about this, so we could get rid of metal. Roughness is less about how rough it is and more about how shiny the surface is, in a different way than metallic. Metallic is about metallic reflection, and roughness is like the natural shininess of the material. So if you had like a wood grain, put my wood back up here, this is shinier than this. So I don't even really think you need roughness on here, but it does make a difference. See, so it's a negative effect. So having this says, based on the settings below, says don't have any roughness or don't have any shine. But by taking it off, it has shine. So it's kind of it works in reverse logic, as you can see by turning it on and off. And a lot of these things work with grayscale maps too, so they help show, like, if it's black or white in the map. It's like if I were to set up a map and I painted part of it black and part of it white, part of it would be shiny and part of it would be matte. It's the same kind of concept applies, and so the settings below affect how these appear. I'm not using these for this model, so and then this is just basically showing you the model, not the model, the material that we've chosen. There's attributes panel here, which is just basic information about it. You don't really need to play with that. Then there's channels mapping. It's basically, this is mapping to the different channels that we could output when we make our output textures. And so we're using base color, height, roughness, metallic, and a normal. And I don't mess with that. Next one down is parameters, and this is where you start actually playing with things. So this is what you can adjust. So the first one is called preset, and it's very interesting to me that some of these materials that you get come with a number of different presets, and presets are just someone's gone through and made a bunch of different changes to the detailed parameters and then saved it with a name. So it's easier for you to make changes just by picking them from a menu. You don't have to actually go in and make the detailed changes yourself. You can if you want to, but this gives you some options. So someone did some extra work. Now the interesting thing for me is the one you see right now is not included in this list. So when you drag a material or a smart material onto your object and you go to the presets and you pick a different preset, you lose the original. So there's 3 in here. There's terracotta wall. I'll click on that and you'll see it changed, right? Oh, let me get rid of this. That might be affecting things. It's not. The next one is called wet terracotta wall, and you'll notice it looks different. And then the third one is ancient terracotta wall. So that's 3 different presets that it comes with to give you a fairly different look from this material. So you can kind of say, oh, I guess 4 different materials for the price of one. But the interesting thing now is, how do I get back to the first one? I want that one. I liked it. It's not in the list. So I can't go back to it. The only way to go back to it is I have to delete this material from my layer and drag it back out. Now, I forgot which one it was. We'll just use that one. I don't know if that's the same one. Yeah, it's not the same one, but it looks good, so we'll just go with that. Might have been this one. Nope. I have no idea which one I used. This one? There it is. We'll put it back. It was the ancient cracked mud brick clay wall. All right. Now for the fun stuff. So remember that about your presets, though. If you do change your preset, you can't get back to the original one. You got to reload it. This material has two different things you can change the color of. You have what's called terracotta color and the terracotta second color. And so what you see on this object now, there's areas that use a lighter color and areas that use the darker color. And this material was set up to blend those in a way that gives you this look. Now, you can change the colors. If you don't like them, you can make this redder, and it's going to look like that. Or you can make it browner. They use two that are very close to give you a more natural look like this. If you make them too extreme, it starts looking weird. Now, there might be a time where you want something like that, but for this purpose, it's not really what I want. I don't remember what the setting was, so if you do that and you make some changes and you go, oh man, I don't remember what it was, just hit Control Z and you can cancel it and it goes back to what it was originally. Another thing to remember is you can sometimes write these down on a piece of paper. All right, so the second color intensity is a slider that you can adjust to change the way this looks, and it was at 0.5. I'm going to slide it around and you can see what happens. The more I go this way, the darker color becomes more intense. As I go the other way, it kind of fades out until it becomes only really one color, which is the second color. So put that back to 0.5, and then you have this thing called second color spread, which is about how much of the area is covered by one color versus the other. And so right now it's 50-50. It's set at 0.5. So if we slide it this way, you'll see that that color kind of takes over. And if we go the other way, this color takes over. And so you can play with these sliders to get it to look the way you want. And they had it set at about 0.5, so they were equally balanced. And this changes the lighter color. It's the same thing. You just click in there and you can pick a different color. This is called the terracotta roughness. This is how reflective the surface is. And so you can play with it. As you bring this down, it becomes shinier, and as you go up, it becomes less shiny. This is like what I was talking about up here with this. So if this is off, then this just stays it's the same thing as if this were slid all the way to 0. But let's leave it where it is right now. Then you have cuts intensity. Well, cuts are, I don't know what a cut is. This is unique to this material. So all of these parameters were created by the person who created this material, and they named them. So you pick another material, it's going to have different things in here and different names. And some materials have a lot of stuff you can control, but they have to build that in. They have to build in. There's a node you put in there that says, yep, we want a slider for this, and here's the different parameters that we're going to expose to the user so that they can have a little slider to control this. Not everybody's that diligent when they make their materials, and they don't necessarily provide those controls. So this one has a lot, and I don't know what they do, but we'll play with it. You can see. So this is called cuts intensity, and I'm sure it has to do with like the gouging or these cracks or something in here, but let's look and see. So it's set at 0.5 right now. If I bring it up, they look deeper and more pronounced to me. And if I go the other way, you can see that they kind of smooth out. So yeah, that's to give you the more three-dimensionality of these what they call cuts. The next one is how many of the cuts do you have? It's set to 38 right now. It can go all the way up to 60, and so you can see there's a lot more of them, or you can pull it down, and there's less of them. So this was set to 38. Go back close to that. There we go. Next is called rake intensity. Again, I don't know what a rake is. It's something to do with the 3D texturing on this. So we'll slide that over and slide it down and see if we notice any changes. There's a subtle change happening, but I can't really tell you what it is. And again, I don't know what that was set to, so control is 0.5. Looks like all of these are 0.5. Next one is called layering intensity. And see, it makes changes. So you just kind of play with that until you get it where you like it. And then layering spread. Oh yeah, I see it. And see, it's this area here. That line, the 3D, it's like a elevation change or something, becomes more pronounced. That's kind of cool. It's the cracking and the layering of the mud, right? So those are the things you can change. The rest of these parameters down here you don't really change, so you don't need to worry about that. It's the ones in here in the parameter section that you play with to manipulate this. Okay, so that's what you can do with this particular material. The other thing you can do is, I gotta find where it's at. There it is. Is it on both of these tabs? Oh, there's really no difference. Okay, so on this tab, on the left one, you have some additional parameters. So you have the projection, filtering, UV wrap. I don't play with those. I don't adjust those. So I would just suggest leaving those alone until you do a lot more research and figure out what they mean. UV transformation, though, is important. So this is where you can make this scale the texture, rotate the texture, or shift the texture either up and down or left and right to get it precisely what you want. And so we talked about when I put this on here that I felt like this texture was too large for this object. I mean, I'm getting used to it now. I'm looking at it. It's like not so bad, but yeah, it is kind of large. So I can tile this to make it smaller and tighter. And you can do that by either the way it is default with this locked. You change one parameter and it affects both directions, up and down and left and right. Or you can unlock this and then you would change each one independently. So you could have the horizontal scaling at a 5 and the vertical scaling at a 1. It gives you more control. But I like to keep it just kind of uniform, so I lock it unless I have a reason not to. And then all you can do is you can change this number here manually by selecting it and typing in a value, or you can just use the slider and slide it around until you get it looking the way you want. So I'm just kind of playing with it. That looks kind of all right. So let's look around. So you hold down the Alt key and left click and drag to rotate around your model. And it's Alt and the middle button down to pan around. I mean, it looks okay to me. Let's just leave it like that. Okay, so I could have used any texture, any one of these different materials. I could have used any of them and put on here. But we chose this one because it looks like stone, right? Now, if I were to export this and bring it into Second Life, it would look okay. But it's kind of lifeless. It's kind of just, it looks new. It looks like someone just went to the stone box store and bought this and brought it home, and it's shiny and new. Things don't normally look that way in real life, and in Second Life you might want this to not look so new and shiny as well, because new and shiny comes across as fake a little bit, right? So you want it to be a little dingy, you want it to have some flaws, you want it to have some character. And the ways you can add that is by doing some of the other things that Substance Painter allows you to do. But you can also, and this is what I do a lot, is you can use smart materials, because smart materials, someone's already done that work for you. They've already gone through and added a bunch of shadows and a bunch of scratches or dirt or whatever to these to make them look a little more rugged. And so a lot of times I'm in a hurry to produce things, so I'm on a schedule, so I don't want to take a lot of time to do it myself, so I'll use things that someone else has done. So let's take a look at doing something like that. Let's go over to the Smart Materials panel, and you can see these are a little more complicated looking. I'll go down and pick something like this wood one down here, which I think always looks really good. So we'll drag that and we'll put it on here. You can see what it looks like. So this is a smart material based wood, and then we'll go back to the materials and I'll put a regular wood on here. Let's see if I have one that's a similar color. Or maybe this teak. So there you have just a normal material, and everything else is off, right? So what you can see, it has a wood grain, it has some three-dimensionality to it. Someone has gone through, when they created this in Substance Designer, they had it generate a normal map so that the grain of the wood has some depth to it, and it has some shininess, so it has a specular map or something, a roughness map to create that kind of shininess. And I also noticed that there's a few scratches, like there's a scratch right there on the top. I also saw one somewhere on the side. There was, right, there's a scratch right there. So and there's a scratch there. So there's some scratches over here. So they built those scratches in Substance Designer and included it in this material. But I mean, I think you would agree with me when you look at this. Yeah, it looks nice, but it looks really rather plain. Whereas this one is much richer. There's shadows on it. You can see there's shading here at the top where these two pieces come together. There's a lot more darkness in there. There's darkness here under this edge. There's darkness down here. There's splotchiness to it. There's some splotching going on over here on the left. You can see dirt and a lot of different things to add character to this, and this looks more realistic. This is something that I could use just like it is, and I do. So I use this material, smart material, quite often for the things that I create in Second Life, and I use it just as it is because I think it looks great. Now, how can we make the other wood look more like this wood? There are ways to do that. So we can take this and we can add things to it that are going to give it some of those features. So there's a bunch of different ways to do this, and I'll show you some of them. So I'll show you 3 different ways. So the first one is we're going to add what's called a generator to this, and then we're going to use some of the existing generators to add some character. So to add a generator, you have to add first what's called a black mask. So you right click on this layer and you go up to here and add a black mask. Now, we could have added the generator without a black mask, but then it would just be there all the time and 100% of it would be there. But by adding a black mask, what it says is it uses a grayscale image, and things that are white show up one way and things that are black show up another way, and then grays are somewhere in between there. And then in this black mask is where we're going to put our generator. So we're going to add the generator. And there it is. It says we have a generator, but it's empty. And I don't notice anything different over here, except now this wood grain is gone, because it's being controlled by this generator. And because we have a black mask, and it's in it right now, the black mask is 100% black, none of the wood texture is showing through. Now, we're going to use the generator to create a 2D image in there that's going to be grayscale, which will have some white and some gray areas, which will allow the wood grain to show through. And to do that, we need to pick a generator. And so we come down here to the generator panel in our properties tab, And it says right here, generator, no generator selected. So this is a button. It doesn't really look like a button, but it's a button. So you can click that and you get a menu full of the generators that Substance Painter came with. And there's a bunch of them in here. I don't know what half of them are for. And then some of them are used, like this mask editor. That's used when you use 2D texture maps as masks. And it gives you some controls over those masks, which you'll see, I think you'll see when we do a smart mask, because smart masks use mask editors. But let's see what we've got. We've got one here called Dirt, and we've got one called Dripping Rust, and we've got one called Fiberglass. This one's called Inflate. I don't want to use that. Metal Edge Wear. Let's just use this one called Dirt. So we're going to pick Dirt. And there you go. So now what we have is this shows you can see, I don't know if there's a way to blow, oh there, you can see it. So this is a combination of I think it's our ambient occlusion map that we made when we did our bake mesh maps, with a 2D, what I think they're called grunge maps, applied to it, which gives it grayscale. So areas that are white in this map, the grain shows through, and areas that are black, the grain doesn't show through. And so that's why it looks the way it does. Now we have some controls that usually we have some controls that we can play with, but why am I not seeing them? Maybe we don't. But if I turn this off or hide it like this, it just goes back to white, because again it's all black. Oh, there we go. So if I click on this little icon, I get some controls down here that I can adjust. So there's things like, I think one of the important ones is balance. So it's set to 0.5 right now, but watch what happens when I slide this over. Anything? I don't really see any output changes. I see changes here, but I don't really see any changes in my model. Oh, and you can invert. I don't know why it's not making any. Doesn't seem to be having any effect. So, yeah. All right. So you may be wondering at this point, well, where's my wood grain? I don't really want my wood grain to look like that, right? So we need to add it back as a separate layer. And then what I said, oh, well, I can't really see the dirt anymore. Well, yeah, because you're using the same wood grain as the dirt and turning on and turning it off so that parts of it show, parts of it don't show, but the parts that do show are the same as the parts that were already in here. So we need a different texture to use for the dirt. So instead of using the wood grain, you can click on this. We'll go down here, and instead of using this, we can get rid of it. And we can use a solid color if we want. So let's say for dirt, we want something that's kind of brown, orangish brown, and we'll pull it down here like this. And now you can actually see the dirt. See, the darker I make it, the more you notice the dirt. See? So now you can see the dirt, right? Because it's using a different image to overlay on top of this model than just the wood. So I've got some dark dirt that's showing up down here. So that's how you would do it if you wanted it. I went in a roundabout way, right? So I said, oh, we'll take this and we'll add a dark mask and then we'll do that. You can do that for other things too, but the good thing is you can start with it and get there by doing the same thing. So I'll show you. So let's just we'll add a fill layer. Now we have a fill layer, and I can go in and pick a color, and we'll pick like a brown color like that. And so when you do that, it applies it uniformly over the whole thing, right? Then we add our black mask. And in the black mask, we're going to add a generator. And then in the generator, we're going to pick dirt. See, now you're back where you started from. Let's add another one. Let's do something a little different. Let's do, the other generator was called dripping rust or something like that, right? Well, this is metal. I mean, this is not metal, so rust kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. But so instead, it's just called rust, and it's going to have the similar appearance to what rust would give you. But let's make it a not rusty color. Let's do something else. So we'll add a fill layer. Let's pick a color that's kind of in that same color family, but we'll do a lighter color and see how it turns out. We'll add a black mask, and then we'll add a generator, and the generator we'll pick will be this dripping rust. And there it is. We've just splattered kind of rust, light colored rust all over the whole thing. So if I want to change that color, make it darker, I can just click on this and then drag that down, and it darkens. I can make it more orange, so it kind of blends in a little more. Or I can just make it like that. Let's go with that for now. All right. And I can click on this fill layer. And then I have parameters that I can, oh, there are parameters. Oh, okay, that's what I did wrong. So I was clicking on this and trying to change the parameters. What I need to click on is this and open up the parameters panel, and then I can change it. So we're doing the dirt here. One of the cool things is there's this invert button. You can turn that. It's on false right now, so if I invert it, what it's going to do is it's going to switch the white in the bitmap, the grayscale bitmap. It's going to switch the white and the black, and well, what will happen is the blending will switch. So the areas that are wood grain right now will become dirt, and the areas that are dirt right now will get the wood grain. So by inverting that, it does that. See? You can just flip that back and forth, and you can invert it. Pick the one you want. I like this one. Now you can have, this is controlling the spread of the rust, so that you go up, the whole thing becomes rust, or you go down and there's no rust at all. And then I can find some happy medium. Like that looks okay. I don't want a lot, so just a little kind of splattering of it. And then this contrast is how it's like contrast in a photo editor. So this blends in a little more. This stands out more. I kind of like that. And then there's like spreading smoothness. It kind of blurs it. So if I turn this up, instead of being so clear and distinctive, they become kind of blurry. See? And then drips intensity. Watch what happens when I play with that. See, now they become much more drippy, as opposed to just kind of spots. So kind of like. And you just play with this until you get it where you want it. Oh, I kind of like that. And then this affects the smoothness of that. So they kind of blur together, or they become very sharp and clear. I like that. And then drips samples amount is how many. This is like affects the number of these things. So you can lower this down, and you get less of them. Oh, no. It has to do with the. Yeah, it is. But again, you just got to kind of play with it. And positions axis, Y green channel. I don't really know what that is. All right, so there we put this on there and we were able to play it. Let's go back and do the one for the dirt too. So on the dirt one, if we click on that with the parameters panel open, you can invert it and see what it does. It switches it. See? The areas that have the wood grain become dirt, and the dirt areas become wood grain. And this dirt level is how much dirt do you get. And then dirt contrast again is whether it's like blends in with the background more or stands out more. I don't know what that means. Grunge amount does that. It's like the grunge is I think in this context the grunge is the stuff that's splattered on the side, I think. Whereas the dirt buttons up here, they control the dirt on the ledges here. This controls more about what's on the side. And then you can scale it, play with it. Kind of gives you that clouds. It's like grunge. Usually when I say grunge, it makes me think of cloud. And then it says you can use a custom grunge, or you can use the one that they provided. And I'm just going to use the one that they provided. And edges masking. I'm not sure what that does. Oh yeah. So when I turn that all the way to 1, you notice the edge there becomes wood grain. And if I slide it back down the other way, it's dirt. It's more dirt. It just is this affecting how clear the edges become. And then it has a thing called micro details, which is interesting. I wouldn't play with it because I have no idea what that does, but it's stuff you can change. So there we use 2 different generators to add some dirt and splotches and stuff to this to kind of give it some character. We turn those off. Then it goes back to being just the bare wood. Turn them on, you get some ruggedness to it. I'm not a huge fan of how this one turned out right now, so I'm going to get rid of it. But we'll keep that. Okay, so that was using generators. Now another way you can do this is using what's on this tab, which is called textures, and then they have all these different grunge textures. So basically what I would be doing is manually setting up the same thing that we did here with these generators. The difference is this method uses a fixed 2D grayscale map, right? The generator creates that map based on sliders. So the generator, and there's only a couple different generators in there, right? So you don't get a lot of functions. But you can do the same thing by picking a different texture that's showing down here. And so it works the same way. So let's turn these off for now. Just turn this one off. We'll, in fact, let's duplicate this layer. I'm going to duplicate it. How do you duplicate? It's in here somewhere. Duplicate layer. Okay, I duplicated the layer, and then I'm going to remove that mask. So I just have the same color. It's the same color that I had to begin with. Now we're going to do it manually. So I'm going to add a black mask, and then we're going to add what's called I think it's the fill. Right? Yeah, there's the fill, and then this right here is telling me what is being used for that fill right now. It's just a grayscale, uniform grayscale color. But I can click on that, and then I can go pick something to put in there instead. And so this is where I can pick one of these different textures, or I can just come over here and get it and drag it over. It's the same exact thing. What we're looking at here is the exact same menu as what's over here. So instead of doing it that way, I'm going to grab something from here, and let's just pick, like, okay, that one. And we'll drag it here, and there you go. So it's not exactly the same as what came out of the generator, but you now have the ability to really control how it looks by picking a different kind of the different texture that you use here. You get a different look. So like this one, that one had fingerprints in it. Right, it looks like, yes, fingerprints dusty. Maybe you did it on some, like a glass window or something. So you have so many ones to choose from here that it's like, it's not even funny. You spend all year just kind of going through here. You go, what does this one do? What does this one do? What does that one do? What is that? What happens if I use this one? So that's the second way. Second way is you manually do it by adding a black mask, adding a fill layer into the mask, and then dragging one of these grayscale grunge maps into that fill layer, and you get that. So the third way is using what are called smart masks. So we're going to remove this mask. Just go back to the original color again. And now what I'll do is, instead of adding a black mask and then filling it with something, I'm going to use a smart mask that somebody's already created. And so there's a whole bunch of these to choose from. So like there's one called Dirt Ground. Let's try that and see what happens when I drag that onto this layer. You just drag it on the layer. Bang. Ta-da. And now if you want to manipulate that, there's parameters and things that you can click on to do that. But notice now what it put in here was this thing called Mask Builder. Well, lo and behold, where have we seen that before? Well, that was when we did the generator, right? When we were putting a, how did I do that? We go over here and you add a generator, and then you pick a generator. There's one in here called Mask Builder right there, Mask Builder Legacy. So if I drop that in right there, that is the exact same as what's in that smart mask. And then if I delete just that part, then what I can do with this mask builder is I can come in here, and based on the settings that are in here, I can pull the different grunge maps into here. And I can reproduce what's in that smart mask manually. So, and that's what someone did. So they actually manually created it, and then they were able to save that smart mask. And there's a way, if you right click on here, you can save things out. This is copy mask. I don't see where you can save a mask. But you can, the whole layer, you can actually say, I want to create this and make it into a smart material. There's a way to save it once you have it done. Okay, so we have this one. Oh, I think I messed that one up. So we have this one. Let's do another one where we'll put cavity rust. So let's set up a color. So we'll do a fill layer. We'll fill that color with a really dark kind of brown, like right there. Maybe a little darker. And then let's do this cavity rust smart mask on it. And that's what it did. See, it does this. And I can go down and click on mask editor. I can change the parameters. There's not a lot of parameters you can adjust there. But that gives me this look. Well, I'm not sure I like that look. So let's remove the mask. And let's try something else. How about stain surface? Stain scratches. What does that do? Okay, it gives me a bunch of scratches and stuff on here. And then if I turn that one back on, so now I have both of them combined. This one's called surface rust. But if I do that one instead, let's get rid of this mask and do surface rust mask. Oh, see, that really looks much more detailed, right? Yeah, that actually is pretty cool. And then let's try, I don't know, is that enough? It might be enough. So I think you get the idea. That's 3 different ways, right? So you can add you can add a generator, and you can manipulate the generator. You can add a black mask, and then a fill, and then drag in your own grayscale textures, and then you can use a smart mask. And so that gives you the ability to add a whole bunch of different looks to your object to add more character. So let's try starting over again and doing a different look on here, just so we can see what we can come up with. So let's take this carved marble. I'm going to go down to the parameters on that, and I want to adjust my marble smoothness to get rid of that. Looks, I don't know, like leprosy or something. It's looks like rough marble that someone's been chiseling on and they haven't smoothed it yet. So we're going to smooth that out by dragging this over. And remember I told about on the different materials, you have these different sliders. Each one's unique, and it was set up this way by the person who created the material. Well, this person created all of these different functions to give you something that looks like white marble. And so I'm going to make it smooth like that. Then I want to change the color of this marble because I don't really want it to be white. I want it to be more, a little darker. So there we go. I changed the color of my marble. It's a little darker now. Now I want to add some kind of grungy stuff to it. So I will add a layer. I'm going to set the color to just a darker, something like that. And then I will add a smart mask for dirt on the ground. I want to do stuff on the ground, so around the ground. But let's try this rust ground. Wait a minute. This one, ground dirt. Okay, so that didn't really give me the look I was going for. What does it do? Oh, I guess it does. Yeah, it's there. It's just not as intense as I was hoping it would be. So there's ways to play with that. You can manipulate the parameters on the editor or on the actual map. But I think I'm just going to remove that mask and try a different one. So that was this one. Let's try dirt, leak, dry, dirt, dusty, dirt, dry, dirt, crevices, dirt, ground. There we go. Yeah, that's better. That's more like what I wanted. I think I remember the name, and that one's called dirt ground. That one's called ground dirt. I think I just had them backwards in my mind. All right. So that does that. Now let's see what else we have in here. Let's do something around the edges. I want the edges to look kind of scruffed up. Like that's kind of cool, the dusty edge. So let's do the same thing we did. We're going to add a color, and we want that to be, I want it to be a darker gray. Let's go even darker. Let's go like way down dark. And then we'll just drag this edge which one was this one? Edge dusty on there. And you can see it's subtle effect, but it's there on the edge. And you can see it does make a difference. And not sure what that's going to do to it, but it doesn't seem to do much. Okay. Let's see what else we have in here. Let's try stains and scratches. And wait. There's one called moss. Let's use that. Let's do moss. Wait, there's another one called moss from top. Yeah, let's do that. So we're gonna add some moss on here. What color should our moss be? I think it should be a green. Let's try a deep dark green. There's green. And we're gonna pick something like right there. Maybe even right there, darker. Okay, that's gonna be the moss color. And then we just grab moss from top, I think that's what it's called, and drag that on there. And now you have moss coming off at the top. So if you zoom in, you can actually see. I might have made that too dark green. See it? There's moss growing. Let's make that a little lighter green. Like that. Okay. So now you can see there's moss on our stone. And now there's a way, and I can't remember how to do it right now, so I'll probably make another video tomorrow when I'm more awake that shows how I can add a mask to this layer that then I paint on with black. And I just come over here and I grab the paintbrush and I paint on here in black. And as I do that, the moss disappears. So it's what it does is it remember I was talking about you have the grayscale, and so the black means it doesn't show through and white means it shows through. So that's all you're going to do is you're going to paint on black, and wherever you paint the black, the moss won't show through, because maybe you don't want moss growing on the top of this and you only want it on the sides. So that's what you can do to make that all work, and it's really cool. But I have to do it tomorrow. It's late, I'm tired, and it's been a busy day. So I'm going to finish this video with that, and maybe we'll continue with this tomorrow, but this will get something for you guys to take a look at. So that was doing a bunch of stuff in Substance Painter to add depth and character to our models beyond just using the provided materials or the smart materials. Oh, one other thing. So let's say I wanted to use this beautiful set of materials that I've created, these layers. I wanted to keep that so I could use it again. Well, I did that earlier today, but I'll show you how you do it. So basically all you do is you just create a group, then you take all of these and you drag them into that group. So now they're inside this folder. I can rename this folder and call it test material, like that. And then you just right click it and you say create smart material. And so when you do that, there will be a new material inside my asset panel called test material. But I don't really like this enough to save it, so I'm not going to save it. But I will show you that I already did one earlier that looks a little bit better. So if I go to smart materials, I think I called it Bandor's mess. Yep, right there. There's Bandor's mess. So I can just drag that on my model now because I saved it as a smart material. And it will now apply all the stuff that I did earlier. So I actually had some blood splatter and stuff like that. And so if I open this up, you can see what I had in it. I have a whole bunch of different things that I had created. And there's my moss layer. This is the blood splatter. So I can turn off that. Turn off the blood splatter. Just keep turning things off. It gets more back to the beginning. And there we are back at the very basic. Turn it off. We have nothing. So that's what you can do, is you can add as many of these things to your model as you want, and then if you want to save it as a reusable smart material so that you can come back and put it on another object at another time, you can do that too. Anyway, that's the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that was helpful and you understand some things better now. And then if I have time tomorrow, I will work on another video where we actually use the paint tools to actually paint on here, to do use paint to mask things out, but also just to show you how you can paint, because you can actually just paint, right? So if I just go up here and do and add a layer, it puts a new layer up here. I don't know, is that my brush? That may be my brush that I have selected. Then pick a different brush than that one, like pick this brush. And then you can actually just paint right on your... What is it doing? What is that? I don't understand what this is. Looks like it's putting those dots everywhere. I'm not sure why I did that. Oh, right there. Substance material mode. I don't want that. Get rid of that. There we go. So I can pick a color. Let's pick, we're going to paint it purple, just because I want to paint it purple. And you can paint right on here. Wee, 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 wee. And it's a 3D painter, so it paints the top. See, it's painting flat on this surface, and then as you paint, it rotates and paints down the side. And you can paint around the corners too. If you want to do a different color, you just pick blue, and now you can paint in blue. And you can use different types of brushes. So like this gives you fibers. So if I come over here and let's pick red, and I just draw some fibers on here. If you zoom in, you can see it looks like fibers. Or if I want to do fur, soft, I go, oh, look, I got some fur in here now. So this gives you the ability to paint directly on the object. So maybe, I wanted a shadow underneath here. Well, I could have done that just by painting it on. And I'm not that patient, but you could come in here and go, oh, look, I'm just going to add a shadow right underneath there. And maybe you want to use a different brush for that, like a blur brush. Or a burn, or artistic print brush. We'll slide this in here. So there's no material picked. So the different brushes have different requirements. So there's charcoal. So anyway, I hope you see how that works. You can paint directly on it, which looks really bad right now. And you can create your own materials. So, all right, that definitely ends the video for today. And we will do some more later. Have fun. See you. Bye-bye.